Your hand is on a cold stair rail in a Bath Avenue walk-up, and somewhere above you a door you're not supposed to knock on is already open. You're not here to watch. Not tonight. Every step you take up that stairwell is a step a jury will ask you about someday, and you know it, and you keep climbing anyway. I spent 4 years inside the Organized Crime Control Bureau in that decade, and I'm going to tell you what the file never says. The rally, June 28, 1971. Columbus Circle. 9 in the morning and the crowd is routine, a few thousand people, folding chairs, a stage, the kind of Italian-American civil rights rally your unit has covered a dozen times that year. You're on the outer perimeter, badge under your jacket, eyes on hands, not faces. That's the training. Hands tell you first. Then a man in a photographer's vest lifts, something that isn't a camera. You are close enough to hear the crowd's sound change before you hear the shots, a kind of collective intake, one breath pulled by 2,000 people at once. Joe Colombo, head of the league organizing the rally, goes down near the stage. The shooter, a young man named Jerome Johnson, is dead on the pavement inside seconds, and nobody in your unit ever agrees later over coffee on who fired the shot that killed him. The official incident report lists Johnson as the lone gunman, motive undetermined. The men who were standing where you were standing tell you, off the record, for years afterward, that Johnson never should have gotten that close, that somebody let him through, that the lone gunman filing closed a door that 100 wise guys in 5 boroughs spent the rest of the decade whispering about. Colombo did not die that day. He lived 7 more years in a hospital bed, unable to speak, and the war his shooting started did the talking for him. And yet the file calls it resolved. It cannot close the fact that no one was ever charged with ordering it. 2 men across 2 families spent the rest of their lives in a fear they never spoke about at dinner tables in Bensonhurst, Bath Beach, and Diker Heights. A fear the report never had a line for. The social club. You learn the rhythm of a social club before you learn anything else about this job. President Street, one afternoon in the fall, folding chairs stacked against a taped-over front window, an espresso machine that never stops hissing. You are parked across the street in a sedan that fools no one, and you watch men arrive on no schedule at all and somehow never miss each other. This is not a boardroom. It is a kitchen with a bad reputation. A capo settles disputes over card debts the way a foreman settles disputes over shift assignments flatly, with a number and no appeal. You watch a man walk in agitated and walk out calm, and you never learn what was said, only that whatever it was, it worked, because he doesn't come back angry again. The surveillance log records subject entered 2:14 p.m., subject exited 2:51 p.m., no further activity observed. What the men on the street corner tell you, weeks later, when you buy them a coffee they don't want to be seen accepting, is that 37 minutes settled something that would have taken the courts 11 months and put nobody in a hospital. The official file calls the location a place of frequent congregation of persons of interest. It does not call it what it was to the neighborhood: a bank, a courthouse, and a barber shop with no sign out front, all running on an economy the census never counted. But the club closed for good in 1980, quietly, no arrests, no headline. And yet the men who drank coffee there for 20 years still meet on the same corner every Sunday, an unbroken habit outliving the business it was built on. A door that stays open long after the room behind it has been condemned. Umbertos. April 7, 1972, 4 in the morning on Mulberry Street, and the Clam house is doing the kind of business only a place open past 3 a.m. can do. A birthday party at one table, tourists slow walking home from somewhere else at another. You are 2 blocks away when the call comes over the radio, and you get there before the ambulance does. Joe Gallo, a capo out on parole and never quiet about it, is at a table with his family when a man walks in from the back near the kitchen. You're close enough, arriving, to see what 4 in the morning does to a room that size, a birthday cake still sitting untouched, a chair on its side, A trail of blood out the door and into the street where Gallo falls a final time in front of his own car. The coroner's inventory lists entry and exit wounds with clinical spacing between each line. It does not list the fact that his 6-year-old daughter was at that table when the first shot went off, and that detail alone did more to end the era of shooting a man in front of his family than any indictment that decade produced. The department's after-action report calls the case unsolved, no arrests made, motive consistent with ongoing inter-gang rivalry. What the waiters told detectives that night, and never told a grand jury, was that the shooter walked through the kitchen like he'd used that door before, like somebody inside had left it open for him on purpose. And yet no employee of that restaurant was ever charged with anything. The gap between what a kitchen door remembers and what a court record needs is the entire distance this case has traveled in 50 years, and it hasn't moved an inch further in either direction since. If you're the kind of person who needed to know how that party ended before you could sleep tonight, stay with me, because it does not end there, it just changes rooms. The envelope. You are 7 months into a wiretap detail on a captain named. The file just calls him Subject 3. When a man you've never met sits down next to you at a diner counter on a Tuesday you didn't tell anyone about. He doesn't threaten you. That's the part nobody warns you about. He asks about your daughter's Catholic school tuition by name, by grade, and then he slides an envelope 2 inches toward your coffee cup and says nothing else, because he doesn't have to. You are alone with a decision that every training film in your career failed to prepare you for, because the training films assume the offer looks like a threat, and it never does. It looks like a man who already knows more about your life than your captain does. The internal affairs file, years later, when this kind of moment finally gets investigated department-wide, will describe such approaches as attempted improper influence of a member of service, a phrase with no coffee cup in it, no daughter's name in it, no 8 seconds of silence in it that felt longer than your whole shift. What detectives who lived it will tell you, in bars, off-duty decades on, is that the ones who said no didn't feel brave. They felt like they'd just missed a train they were supposed to catch. And some nights, they still wonder where it would have taken them. You push the envelope back without a word. He doesn't push it forward again. He just says, "See you around," and he's not wrong, that's the whole point. The case against Subject 3 closes 2 years later on an unrelated tax charge. Envelope never mentioned, tuition never mentioned, because there was never a report filed on either. But the man across that counter is still walking around a Brooklyn neighborhood today, an old man now, greeted with real affection by people who never knew what he offered you, or what it would have cost them if you'd taken it. The room above the bar. Every wiretap room smells the same, stale coffee, cigarette smoke soaked into acoustic tile, the low electrical hum of reel-to-reel machines nobody's replaced since the last budget cycle. You spend more hours of your career in that room than in your own kitchen, headphones on, listening to a family talk about everything except what you need them to talk about. Then, on an ordinary Thursday, a voice you've been listening to for 11 months says a name you weren't expecting, in a sentence about a shipment that isn't cigarettes and isn't furs, and every man in that small room sits up at the exact same half-second, a reflex none of you rehearsed. The transcript that goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office renders that half-second as a single clinical line. Subject discusses logistics of forthcoming transaction, details redacted. It does not render the way 4 grown detectives looked at each other across a table too small for the equipment on it, or the fact that one of them had to leave the room because his own brother-in-law's name came up 2 sentences later. What actually happened in the family's kitchen that Thursday, according to a source who was there and never testified, is that the man saying the name didn't lower his voice at all. He trusted that room the way you trust a room you've never once had reason to doubt. The Wire runs 4 more months before it's shut down on schedule, case folder closed with the phrase, "Objectives of investigation substantially achieved." It leaves out that the detective who walked out of the room that Thursday never worked another wiretap detail again, and never explained why, and nobody in the unit ever asked him to. But the tape still exists in an evidence locker somewhere in a federal building, unlistened to for 50 years, holding one Thursday afternoon that changed one detective's whole career and nobody else's life at all, which is either the smallest outcome in this whole story or the only honest one. The man across the table. You've been offered coffee before. This time you're offered a seat. It's a back booth in a restaurant on 2nd Avenue, no windows facing the street, and the man across from you outranks anyone you've ever sat down with in your entire career. He didn't invite you here to threaten you, and he didn't invite you here to buy you. He invited you here because he wants something simpler than either of those things. He wants to know, man to man, whether you actually believe any of this is going to matter in 20 years. You and the man across the table sit with that question longer than either of you expected to. He's not wrong that half your unit will be reassigned, retired, or dead of a heart attack before half these cases see a courtroom. You're not wrong that he'll be indicted at least twice more before he dies in a hospital bed, surrounded by grandchildren who never once saw the inside of that booth. Neither one of you says the other thing out loud, that you respect each other in a way you'll never be able to explain to anyone who wasn't in that booth, and that this respect will not save either one of you from what comes next. The department's ethics file has a line for meetings like this: unauthorized contact with a known organized crime figure, reported by subject. What it doesn't have a line for is the fact that you walked in already having decided you'd report it, and you still stayed for the full 40 minutes, because some part of you needed to hear him say the thing about 20 years out loud, from a man who would actually know. Nothing was offered, nothing was taken, and yet you carry that booth with you for the rest of your career, a room you were never technically inside of, according to any paperwork that exists. If you've made it this far, you already understand something most people never will, that the line between the detective and the man across the table was never about which side of a badge you were born on. What the file never closes. You retire eventually, the way everyone in this line of work retires, quietly, on a Tuesday, with a pension and a box of files you're not legally allowed to keep and take anyway. You spend the drive home replaying every open door you ever climbed through, every envelope you ever pushed back, every Thursday you ever sat too still in a small room full of recording equipment. The official record of your career is a personnel file with commendations, one disciplinary note from a captain who never understood the booth on 2nd Avenue, and a retirement date. It does not record what any of this actually cost. The marriages strained by silence you weren't allowed to break. The friendships with other detectives that only ever existed inside unmarked cars. The particular kind of tired that comes from spending 20 years listening for the half second when someone finally says the true thing out loud. But the neighborhoods are still there. Bath Avenue, President Street, Mulberry Street at 4 in the morning. They've changed hands and changed names on storefronts, and yet if you walk them today you can still find, if you know where to look, an old man on a folding chair outside a building with a taped-over window, keeping a habit alive that has long since outlived the business it was built to protect. This was never really a war between the department and the mob. It was a war between two ways of keeping a family together, fought street by street, decade by decade, by men on both sides who understood, better than almost anyone else in this city, exactly what it costs to hold a door open for someone you love. That is what I actually learned in that unit, not how to catch anyone, but how ordinary the choice looks in the moment you make it, coffee cup in hand, envelope on the counter, door at the top of the stairs still open. Understanding that doesn't make the job less dangerous. It just means you get to walk past an open door on Bath Avenue someday and know exactly what you chose not to climb toward. If you want more videos like this, subscribe.